Hello, my brogos, ogresses, and fairy tale things. Welcome back to another Shrek video. There have been many Shrek action figures released throughout the years, and today is the exciting showdown of Ultimate Shrek Destiny, the battle of the Shrek action figures. Roll the footage.
They say that deep in the swampy woods, there exists a secret society of ogres called the Pentaveret, a whole army of Shreks that gather once in a full moon and discuss and compare each other's belles, ogre ears, the green pigmentation of their skin, and fight to the death. Shrek, dinner's ready. Oh, Fiona, Donkey, I was just hanging out with some scary friends.
I think we've discovered Shrek Heaven.
Oh no, Donkey, I actually think this is what hell looks like.
Okay, that was fun, but in all seriousness, today I'm going to be ranking all of the Shrek action figures. A bit of ground rules. There have been tons of Shrek figures over the years, hundreds if not thousands, so today we're only going to be looking at the 6-inch scale articulated action figures, since these days in the toy collecting world, people really like the Marvel Legends adjacent scale, and 3 out of the 4 Shrek movies had 6-inch action figure lines to accompany them, so I figured that would be a good base for comparing them. So without further ado, I'm going to flip the camera around, and we're going to be looking at these Shreks very closely. We're going to be judging all of the Shreks and deciding what the Shrek action figure ranking is. Let's get right to it.
And we'll get right into it with the very first Shrek action figure. I'm going to talk a bit about these guys, what I like, what I don't like, and at the end we'll make our ranking list. Now, this one was released all the way back in 2001 by Mcfarlane Toys, and at the time was celebrated in the toy industry for its exceptional detail and accuracy to the computer graphics seen in the film. And even in present day, this is a phenomenal sculpt. It is truly amazing how well it captures the style of the first Shrek movie. The dankness and the grittiness of Shrek is perfectly captured here. Take a look at his tunic. The alligator vest in the back is especially unreal, and the head sculpt is a marvel. It just captures Mike Myers' personality in Shrek so well. And even if you don't like this head, they did a variant where his mouth was closed, so you have a little bit of variety in head sculpt. But everything about this figure is just top-notch. The boots and the hands. Look at the red highlights on the hands. It almost looks like you can see the blood flowing underneath Shrek's green skin. It's crazy detailed. The articulation is not exactly perfect. You get some movement in the arms, you get a little bit in the legs, and that's about it. Like, who am I kidding? This figure has basically no articulation whatsoever. Mcfarlane Toys was just never the toy company with a ton of articulation. But the detail, again, is top-notch. So, if you're looking for a Shrek that looks nice on the shelf and really doesn't do anything, this one looks great. But I'm a little different. I like to go outside and really get in the dirt and take some nice photos of my figures. And while this guy does look very beautiful when photographed, especially considering it's rained where I live, so everything's all green and pretty right now. But he just kind of stands there. He looks like he is waiting for his McDonald's order to be ready. He just isn't very dynamic. But again, the sculpt on this one, the paint apps, the detail, truly ahead of its day. It holds up beautifully, and there's a reason this figure is still very popular in the toy collecting community to this day. So there's the original Mcfarlane Shrek. Now, Mcfarlane Toys did give us some other Shrek figures, which includes this fantastic dude right here, the dragon battling Shrek. Wow, look at this guy. So this one's definitely a bit more dynamic, although I think calling this the dragon battling Shrek is really stretching the truth a little bit, because this isn't Shrek when he battles the dragon, it's Shrek after he beats the dragon, when he removes his helmet for the first time and smiles at Fiona. And this is what I call a scene-specific figure, because look at that face and how well it flawlessly recreates the animation from the film. It is seriously nuts, even to this day, how good of a head sculpt that is. And paint apps are kind of something that's a dying breed in the toy industry. These days, a lot of action figures are just solid color and have improved articulation, but I feel like with paint apps, we've gone backwards. Look at the weathering on this figure. Whether it's the sword, the leather gloves, or the steel armor, everything has such rich texture to it that it doesn't just look cartoon. It looks like real clothing that is actually being worn by a character. It's kind of nuts how good the paint apps on this figure are. Again, articulation, you really don't get anything at all. Like, I get this figure is more action-oriented because this toy line was sold to kids and collectors. But, like, what's a kid gonna do with this? His arm moves up once, you get a little bit there, but even his arms are, like, inhibited by these shoulder pads. And then his legs can rotate in and out, but it just ruins his balance. You want to just keep it in that one position so that he's able to stand. So aside from moving the head back and forth, you know, you have the illusion of articulation with this figure, but you don't really have any articulation at all. So that's a huge knock in my book. But again, the paint apps are so wonderful and amazing that I can't help but forgive the figure a little for not being very posable. Is it much of an action figure? That's a good question. It's action-oriented, and it looks amazing. He's just not going to be able to do a whole lot. But I do love a good scene-specific figure, and this figure does capture that one scene pretty perfectly. Now, he does come with his knight helmet, and what you do is you take these little ogre ears here that look very fragile, and you just stick them in his head. It's kind of amazing. They just fall right in his head, and the knight helmet slips right on. Seriously impressive. Now, I prefer to keep him with the helmet off, because why would you want to hide that amazing head sculpt? But pretty ingenious how they did that. Not a swappable head. You know, they didn't have to remove the ears. They just go right into his head. So this figure is still a modern marvel of toy design over 20 years later. It's weird to think this figure is as old now as Kenner Star Wars figures were in the late 90s. I mean, that's pretty crazy, but ingenious design by McFarlane Toys, and this is one that you'll want to pick up just because it's so unique. Okay, there's actually one more McFarlane Toys Shrek figure, one that a lot of people don't remember, and that's this guy right here. Yeah, there was actually a third unique sculpt to the McFarlane Toys Shrek line, and this figure was part of the Duloc Wrestling playset. He came with a Duloc Knight. And this guy's got a little gimmick. He comes with a chair, you know, when they say hit him with the chair during the wrestling match in the movie, and it slips in his hand, and you can kind of swing his arm, and it's supposed to, like, swing back with the chair, but, you know, the spring has worn out after all these years. But another figure that's very much displayable. It looks good, but no articulation, as you notice. Now, the action feature, again, gives it a bit more playability, so you can at least do something with this figure. I do like it when toys have a solid action feature that doesn't have, like, a big button or anything in there. It's just a spring. You can kind of see in between the crevice there where the spring is. But the sculpting on this one is also good. But I want to highlight how different it is, because while the other two Shrek figures are more or less the same Shrek, McFarlane took a very different approach with this figure. He's actually smaller than the Shrek. So he's a little bit tinier. And I think this may have just been a budget thing, like they wanted to make the playset economically viable. I mean, it's seriously amazing what you got for like $20 back in the day. There was a fully articulated knight figure that came with this and a wrestling ring, and it was a whole thing. But as it is, it's a very different Shrek. For some reason, the tunic is a completely different color, and the vest is much darker, and if you look closely, just the way they've done the weathering looks different. It looks like another toy company made this figure. Even the pants are like a different shade of orange. It's super odd. The head sculpts are the most drastic change. Shrek just looks very, very happy to be wrestling and battling those knights. It's a really uncanny head sculpt. It looks like the stuff you've seen in your nightmares. It's really scary. But that's what happens when you have Shrek happy. And I think the reason this head sculpt stuck out to me so odd at first, because, like, when I first bought this figure, I went, ugh, this is ugly. But, like, now that I think about it, like, when is Shrek, like, genuinely happy? and not like smugly happy. Not with an eyebrow raised, not like smirking or looking suave, like actually just having a good time. We rarely see that, and one of the moments we do see that is when he is just beating the snot out of Lord Farquaad's men. And maybe this is just what Shrek looks like when he's happy. I mean, Shrek is a monster. He's a scary character. He's a type of character design that is meant to be a villain in a traditional fairy tale. I always thought Shrek looked kind of like a boss fight, like in a video game, he's somebody you would battle. He never gave that main character energy. And that's something I loved about Shrek, is that he looks ugly, he's scary looking. And this figure is just that, it's Shrek at his scariest. So maybe you want a Shrek figure to put with your horror figures, or maybe you want to like recreate Shrek in the back rooms or something like that. I don't know, it's a very creepypasta looking Shrek. So if you like the friendly Shrek, yeah, this figure's not for you. I mean, he looks straight up demented there. But I do love how different this figure is. And despite at first being really baffled by this figure, you know, looking at it now, it does a good job. And Shrek 1 just looked so much gnarlier than the other Shrek films. It had such a kind of mean look to it. And this figure just captures the energy of that first Shrek movie in a way that the friendlier figures don't. Like, I can tell you for a fact, in today's friendlier and more corporate world, Shrek would not receive an action figure like this, because Shrek is a amusement park mascot. He's there to promote the Universal Studios brand, and they wouldn't release a product that lives within your child's darkest nightmares. I mean, it's freaky looking. Look at this guy. So if you're looking for a spooky Shrek, this figure wins the award for the spookiest Shrek. Okay, now we're going to be moving on to Shrek 2. And our first Shrek 2 figure comes from Burger King, of all places, as our first fast food premium Shrek. Now, look at this funky little dude. You've probably never seen him. When you think fast food Shrek, you probably think of this guy right here. But this figure on the left was actually a European exclusive toy to McDonald's for the Shrek film. And this is our first kids meal Shrek action figure. So, you know all those classic McDonald's Shrek figures? This was the first figure made in that size, scale, and style. And it gave us a very, very unique Shrek. And I say that because I want to show you here. Remember how I was mentioning how that Shrek was spooky? Well, look at spooky Shrek compared to Shrek 2 friendly Shrek. This is what I was saying. Like, they made the character so much friendlier by the second film. It's kind of hilarious. He looks like an M&M. He's so bright lime green. But this figure is not one to sleep on, despite its rarity. It has some pretty cool things. So it's got this sweet base for one, and I do love when an action figure has a good base because he's easily displayable on the shelf. Now, a downside with this figure is, check this out. Why would they do that? They put the pegs on the figure and not the base. So this guy cannot stand on his own. He has to be on the base. I'm going to guess that was a licensing decision. I'm going to assume that giving him no peg holes made him an action figure, which they couldn't make because Hasbro was the Shrek 2 action figure company. And just these little peg holes make the figure a trophy and not an action figure. That's true. That happens in the toy industry a lot, where little things like that allows you to make an action figure, even when you don't really have the license to make an action figure. Now, let's look at this guy's sculpt. He just looks so, I don't know, so just passive. It's the most passive Shrek I've ever seen. He's just so at ease, so relaxed, despite the fact that he's wearing some pretty gnarly armor here. Check out this original armor design that looks very different from what we saw in the original Shrek film. So just comparing both of these armors here. We have the correct shoulder pads, the gauntlets, right? But then they added this sick breastplate that emulates his vest. And it's an original design. I couldn't find any uses of it other than this toy. Maybe it's from one of the Shrek video games. I wouldn't know. But I think it looks great. It's such a nice design. And he looks like he's part of the Brotherhood of Steel in Fallout or something. I don't know. It's just really neat looking. And then even his tunic has the checkerboard texturing. that you'll see a lot of other Shrek figures did not include this detail. The McFarlane figures did, and that's something this McDonald's toy, Burger King, I'm sorry, not McDonald's. I keep forgetting because it looks so similar to the McDonald's figures we would later get. But this is a Burger King figure, and it looks like a premium action figure. I like that the S is on the back. Look at that. Look how cool that is. That is pretty neat. It's such an original design, and I love when toy companies get to add to the lore. Like, this looks like night armor that Shrek would wear. It's really nice. I quite like this design. So this figure gets huge points because not only is it a fast food toy that really excels, you know, it's got 2 points of articulation, but at this point, I think any fast food toy with any point of articulation is commendable. And it's an original design. Like, it stands out from the other Shrek figures and gives us a battle-oriented version of Shrek that is just super unique and cool. So this one's an oddity, and I really, really like it. Now, I cannot say the same for the rest of Shrek 2, because now we're going to be looking at the main Hasbro figure for the film. And oh my god, you know you got a problem when the Happy Meal toy from Burger King is much better than the actual figure. Oh boy, this guy right here. Now, I'm going to have to be really honest with you people that if it were not for my nostalgia, I would be brutal on this figure. Just brutal, because look at that head sculpt. He looks like he got stung by 1,000 bees. Why is it so puffy? Now, my nostalgia goggles blind me because I grew up with the Shrek 2 toys, and I have so many classic childhood memories and photos of playing with these figures that this Shrek will always live in my heart as like the Shrek action figure. I kid you not, this terrible figure, because I played with him as a kid and I really, really loved him. Now let's break this guy down. He's got a very basic sculpt compared to the previous outing, the Mcfarlane figure. I mean, just look at that downgrade. Oh my goodness gracious. He's even a little shorter, so he's not really to scale. The scale kind of fluctuates. It like goes between 6 and 7 inches, probably depending on whatever the price of plastic was when they made these. Now, the good. This figure's a lot brighter and a lot more vibrant, and the original Shrek film was so dank, its lighting was much harsher than the other films. With the later Shrek movies, Shrek gradually got much brighter and friendlier, and I think Hasbro did a good job of giving us a more modern Shrek in his more corporate and clean colors. I also like the tartan pants on the Hasbro figure a lot more. They just look brighter and they look nicer, and even the Hasbro shoes have a little bit better detail than the McFarlane's ones do. It's just a shame that they couldn't paint that tie right there. But as you go up, it becomes a horror story. The tunic has no texture whatsoever, and it's got these weird brown spots, and it kind of looks like Shrek is wearing a tortilla. It doesn't look like a real tunic at all. It's the opposite of a good paint job. It's a bad paint job. This figure would have looked better if it was just in solid colors. And then as we move on to the head, just complete disaster. The Hasbro head is just horrible. Now, there's actually a good excuse for why the Hasbro figure is so bad, and that's because he has a gimmick where the character is supposed to have farting action. Yes, remember when Shrek drinks the Happily Ever After potion and farts? Well, this figure came with the Happily Ever After potion. It actually does fit in his hand right here quite nicely, but you squeeze him, and he farts. Look at him fart. Wow, isn't that amazing? What kid wants to make their Shrek figure fart? Even as the ripe age of 4, this figure just confused me. I was just baffled why he wasn't posable like my other Star Wars figures, and why he had this weird gimmick. Now, he's got another gimmick called the Ogre Slam. Yep, you swing his arm right there, and it launches forward. And I'm kind of mixed on this. On one hand, this is a more fun feature, and you can really just, knock down those other figures. But also, it means the movement is inhibited. Despite having a ball joint in this hand, you can't do anything with it. Now, he's got a swivel in his hand, so there's one extra joint that the McFarlane figures didn't have. You get that swivel, and then you have a basic, goes up and down. No movement in the legs, actually. And since the head is squishy, oh my god, look at that squish. No articulation. So you have 1, 2, Technically 3 with the slam punch action, but that's pretty much it. Yes, that's right. The Hasbro figure has 3 whole points of articulation, and what's most upsetting about this figure is that it was sold at retail at a premium price. These figures were pricey when they came out, and I remember being in Toys R Us and wanting these figures, and I had to wait until my birthday because they weren't just something you got when you went to the store. They were pricey. Check out this photo of me at Toys R Us back in the day, longing for the Shrek figures. Why would my dad take this photo? That is a good question. But it's funny to me that this figure has the same amount of articulation as the Happy Meal from Europe. And the Happy Meal from Burger King is a better figure. It just is. It looks more like Shrek. It's more action-oriented because it's in the armor. And you can actually pose him and make him do battle and not just fart. So, congratulations, European children. You guys got the best Shrek 2 figure. Now, Hasbro was not content with just ruining Shrek with this one figure. No. This figure was like a plague across far, far away because we then got the Series 2 version of the Shrek that admittedly fixes things. It looks a little better and a little more unique. The mud paint on this figure really helps, I'll be honest. It does. Let's get close and look at the detail. It doesn't look like Shrek is wearing a tortilla. It looks more like an actual tunic. And the belt has now been given some highlights. And even the pants, they have a very nice wash to them. Sure, it's not the tartan print, but the wash is good enough that I'm willing to forgive it. And then his vest has this weird shiny texture. Were they going for like, is it supposed to look like armor? Kind of like that Happy Meal figure? If so, it didn't really work because, I don't know, it just looks odd. It looks like it was barbecued, to be honest. It looks a little weird. But then we get to the head, and the head actually does look a little better. I want to get close here and look at the eyebrows because they actually made them a little better. So the original has these super thin eyebrows that you can tell were just way too tiny for Shrek. Like, those are ridiculous. But the Series 2 figure gives us those classic big, brows that kind of look like Mike Myers' own big eyebrows. It adds, it's a little detail, but it actually does save this head sculpt a lot more. And then with the third assortment of Hasbro Shrek figures, we actually got another Shrek. We got Play-Doh Shrek. This is probably the least common out of all of them. He's got big dumb purple pants and this Play-Doh goop all over him. And then they actually changed the brows. Again, they look more squiggly than the hardline brows of Series 2. I think the mud one looks the best. But yeah, this figure is a total oddity, and I think is the worst of all of the Hasbro Shrek figures. I'm sorry, but Shrek would never wear purple pants. Like, good lord. Good lord. Well, I guess he does in Shrek the Third, right? When he's in that royal outfit, but, he didn't really enjoy that. So, which of the Hasbro Shreks is your favorite? I should say least favorite. I'll be honest with y'all, it's my nostalgia because I actually really like this figure, even though it's pretty terrible. It's almost enjoyable how awful this Shrek is. Like, if you ever want to know how not to make a Shrek action figure, this is it. This is the way to go. So, that's Shrek 2. And by the time we got to Shrek the Third, things got really interesting. In 2007, we probably got the most iconic Shrek figure ever made, the McDonald's Shrek the Third Shrek. This figure is so classic and a part of so many childhoods of the 2000s that it was recently featured in a McDonald's commercial aimed at nostalgia. Now, this figure is a full 6-inch Shrek that was included with kids' meals. And just to give you an idea of how impressive this figure is, I want to compare him to the Mcfarlane Shrek. And you can see how well McDonald's emulated the feeling of an adult collectible Shrek figure. It's kind of crazy. From the tunic to the vest to the pants, the essence of Shrek is captured so well here. And if that's not all, the figure originally had a speaking gimmick where you would press on his chest and he would say movie lines. Sadly, not many of them work these days because, battery corrosion and all that. But the real highlight of this figure is the head sculpt, which I would dare say is one of, if not the best Shrek head sculpts we have ever received on a toy. It's crazy how good this is and how much it looks like the character. Especially in the later films, as again, Shrek became much more friendlier and a bit brighter green. From every angle, this head just looks phenomenal. Now, just to give you an idea, look at this guy compared to the Hasbro Shrek. Now, the one on the left came free with food, and the one on the right costs a premium price at retail. I mean, it's no wonder the Hasbro figures just weren't a huge success. It's impressive what McDonald's gave for free. Now, out of all of the Shrek figures, this one is the most ubiquitous with collecting and the most common. Unfortunately, its drawback is its battery feature. Like I said, none of them speak anymore. But also the articulation. You get 2 points in the hands, and that's about it. Now, I did say that any kids' meal toy with articulation is a plus. But with this figure, I will say it is such a shame that we did not get a fully articulated version of this sculpt. Because I think had this exact sculpt been given full articulation, it would have been the definitive action figure of Shrek. No doubt in my mind. This is just a insane sculpt. It looks so good. And given the lack of paint apps, but the amount of sculpting detail, like the details there, it's just not painted, I would not be surprised if a modern definitive Shrek action figure in present day looked like this. Because toy companies these days, they sculpt the detail and the articulation, but the paint apps have kind of gone away. Things are, more often than not, just sculpted and made in full color plastic. So I think something like this figure with full articulation would be the definitive modern Shrek. McDonald's really just did an insane job, and giving this figure away for free may have been the best, worst thing that could have happened to Shrek figures, because MGA Toys, the company that makes Bratz, actually did have a decent effort of Shrek action figures for the third film. Unfortunately, I think McDonald's cannibalized the sales of these toys because, again, the figure on the right was sold in 2007 as a premium action figure at Toys R Us stores, and the figure on the left came free with your burger. If you took your kid to McDonald's and got the figure on the left, why on earth would you feel the need to spend, like, how much were these figures, $10, $15 at the time, on this premium figure? So, sadly, the McDonald's Shrek ruined the MGA figure's sales potential in my eyes, because I always felt like this is the unsung hero of the Shrek collecting world. And yes, for longtime viewers, I finally got this guy. So, this Shrek here, released by MGA, is our only super articulated Shrek. This is it. This is the only time we got a Shrek with movement everywhere. His arms, his legs, well, not his torso. And his head is not on a ball joint, it's on a swivel, but it's kind of half there. It's getting there. We're making progress. This is a huge step in the right direction. But this figure has become very desirable. I would say out of all of the Shrek figures I have reviewed today, this figure is the toughest to get and can be the most pricey because he scales really well with Marvel Legends and modern action figures, and people want him for that. Also, this guy photographs so well. Something about the colors. You know, they're very stark. His skin is almost lime green. His vest is super dark. His tunic. The colors are admittedly off, but they do photograph well because they're so saturated that when you take this figure under conditions, like again, it rained where I live and I took some nice photos, and by God, these photos look so good. The figure just comes to life. So yeah, this figure is oversaturated. The colors are way too bright and too dark in some places. It's like they went into Photoshop with Shrek. You know, compare that to a more accurate one, like the Mcfarlane figure based off of the first movie, or even the, even the McDonald's figure, you know? I think it does a good job of capturing the green pigment. Yeah, the MGA one looks a little off, but it makes up for it in articulation and charm. But even with the paint saturated, the sculpting here is really phenomenal. And there's actually a variant of this figure, if you'd believe that lets us look at the sculpt completely unpainted. This is the Silver Shrek variant. I did do a video review on this guy, if you want to see me talk about a weird silver Shrek figure that kind of looks like Metal Mario. But we can look at this figure closely and just see how good of a job they did with the sculpt. I think the head sculpt on this figure is amazing, but it had a less than ideal paint job. So if you look at the painted one on the left, I've kind of studied this for a while and like tried to figure out why it's flipping a switch in my brain and why it's not connecting with me. And I think it's because two things. One, they didn't paint the inside of the mouth enough. If you see, it's just a solid color red there. It needs like a hint of tongue or something in the back to give it a little more depth. The other thing is the brows. If you look at the sculpted figure on the right, the brows are very thick and full, like Shrek's big brows are. It's such a defining part of the character. But if you look at the final version of the figure, his brows are like freshly shaved. They barely exist at all. There's actually, we're going to get really close to Shrek's head here. There's more sculpted brow than there is actually painted brow. So maybe a customizer, with wicked skills could fix this figure. But, he's so collectible these days, I really don't want to ruin it. It's interesting to look at these and see, where you go from the sculpting stage to the painting stage. It's kind of a shame that sometimes beautiful sculpts can get lost in translation. Now, I am not saying the one on the left is a bad paint job at all. It is actually really good. Look at the tartan pants. The shoes aren't quite fully painted, but the tunic's impressive. It looks just like Mcfarlane stuff. So, again, this is a half there figure. It's just short of greatness, but even as it is, if you're looking for articulation, this is going to be your best bet. You get a lot of movement in the arms, so he can be very expressive. One thing that really separates this Shrek apart from the pack is his ability to hold things. Here he's having a little bit of a ginger snack, which Gingy doesn't look too happy with. But all of the other Shrek figures have either closed fists or their hands are cupped, but they're not wide enough to where they can really hold anything. But this guy has two usable hands, which is always a plus on any figure you want to use. Especially for action figure photography, this guy can be super useful. And again, those saturated colors, they may look kind of off-model and ugly at first, but once you begin photographing this guy under the right conditions, he can really, really shine. So that's the MGA Shrek. Actually, that's not the whole MGA Shrek, because they gave us one more variant of Shrek here, and they gave us Dragon Battling Shrek, or, Saw Shrek. Does this figure look and sound familiar? Yes, this is a remake of that classic McFarlane Toys Shrek, but with added articulation in the arms, and, this is kind of an interesting figure. So, sculpt-wise, the head is nice. I actually like the head on this guy a bit more than the other figure, but the body is huge. He's like 500 pounds. What the heck happened? I get that Shrek is huge, but look how much huger the one on the left is. The one on the left is after eating McDonald's only for a month. That's Super Size Me Shrek. What the heck happened? Why didn't they just reuse this figure? In the toy industry, reuse is so common to save money. You could just take this Shrek, give him some shoulder pads, give him an angry head, and call it a day. But no, they made this new figure that is so wonky and weird. So for one, he's way off model because he's the widest Shrek ever made. He is just a big, wide boy. And then this articulation he has is useless because, this hand can bend, but look, you get no degrees of movement. And then this hand, it has the idea of a joint right here, but it doesn't move. What's the point of this? What am I supposed to do with this? It's so weird. Now, this figure also has leg articulation, but again, that's all you get. They don't even swivel. That's it. And then his horns go back in his head so that the knight helmet can go on, just like the other figure. I don't have the knight helmet for this guy, but the knight helmet from the original figure fits on perfectly. So if you have a spare one of those, that's all you need. And then I had a really weird conspiracy theory because I was comparing both of these figures on my shelf, and I kind of realized that they're really similar. Now, not just with the fact that they're dragon battling and that they both have retractable ogre horns, which is odd, if I had a nickel, 2 nickels meme, but the shoulder blades look really similar. And I get that they're supposed to be, the same shoulder blade, but then it occurred to me, did the sculptor of this Shrek just take the sculpt of the McFarlane figure and, change it by 25% and pass it off as a new figure? And for me, the smoking gun is the hands. Why do both of these Shreks have the exact same funkily posed hand here? I get that in McFarlane's case, he was going for scene-specific. You could even argue that the hand on the McFarlane figure kind of fits with McFarlane's style of toys. It's a very alert hand. It looks like something you would see on a comic book character. But why would MGA, the fledgling doll company that had never made action figures before, try such an ambitious hand sculpt that... I'm trying to get the camera to focus a little more here. Just look at that hand. Why is it so freaky like that? And then the nonsense articulation in this hand makes a bit more sense if it was just copied off of this figure here. And when you look at the two next to each other, I mean, it's really tough not to argue, yeah, maybe they did borrow some elements. Even the legs may have been borrowed. Maybe the McFarlane figure was digitally scanned and altered. And maybe the only original new thing here is the torso and the head, which would also explain why the torso and the head on this figure are so out of proportion and bad compared to the rest of it. This figure is some sort of Frankensteinian combination. Now, this is just a theory, a toy theory. I'm not accusing anyone of theft. And maybe in the toy world you can do stuff like this. Tooling is we used a lot. It's very possible that McFarlane Toys gave MGA full permission to its sculpts and figures and allowed them to recreate the dragon battling Shrek. It does happen more often than you'd think. So even when toy companies jump licenses, if a toy company has never tried their hand at a figure before, they can have access to the older figures and reproduce them. So you never know. It could be, but either way, this figure attempts to be a sequel figure to the dragon battling Shrek, and I think it completely falls short. I am not a fan of this guy. He's also a very common Shrek. For some reason, this figure was very overproduced, and the other Shrek, the regular one, was very underproduced. So often you will find this guy cheap on the secondhand market, and the other Shrek will be very pricey. Okay, we have only one more Shrek movie to go, Shrek Forever After, which sadly did not receive a traditional toy line. It had some funky tiny figures from Playmates that I've actually looked at before. And we did get a second McDonald Shrek, and I don't like this guy at all. Compared to the other McDonald Shrek, this guy's a huge fail. For one, as you can see, he doesn't stand, so I just have to hold him in place. Now, I think he can if you move his hands back. Yeah, there you go. But that's not how he should be posed. This is supposed to be Shrek doing his ogre war, and the fact that he can't stand when doing his ogre war makes this figure a 0 out of 10 in my book. The detail's good on the tunic. The head sculpt looks bloated and bad. The only nice thing I can say is that I like he has the gauntlets that Fiona ties in Forever After. That makes the figure specific to that movie, and I like that it makes him different. Now, this is another case of kids who lived in countries that were not the United States getting better toys, because if you were in Mexico or Australia or the Philippines, you got this guy, a much, much better Shrek figure that has his baby. The gimmick with this figure is that you get Shrek in both timelines of the movie, because Shrek 4 is about alternate timelines. You get baby, fatherly Shrek. This figure's really adorable, I won't lie. And then it comes off and he becomes Battle Shrek, and when he's ready to face Rumpelstiltskin. Okay, so the shield looks a little tiny. It kind of just melds into his body. It's really awkward looking. But you know what? I don't care, because the baby's adorable. And I love Shrek as a dad figure. It's a dad Shrek toy. This one's another novelty. It's very unique. You only get 1 point of articulation because of that gimmick. But I don't care. I love a good gimmick figure, and that's exactly what this is. Sorry, United States, you lose this round. The other countries got the better Shrek figure. So that was Shrek Forever After, and after that, Shrek would go on hiatus for 15 years, over 15 years, before the release of Shrek 5. Now, in the time since the Great Shrek drought, we have had a couple of Shrek action figures. The first one, the last Shrek Kids Meal figure we got was from Wendy's. So that's right, Burger King, McDonald's, and Wendy's all got to have the Shrek license. And the Wendy's Shrek is probably the most underwhelming of the bunch. You have the least amount of plastic used here. He's hunched over. His head sculpt looks kind of bad. And he has this weird, shiny texture. I don't know how to explain it, but a lot of Wendy's toys look like this. Like, there must just be a way Wendy's assembles their toys that a figure like this is made. But, you know, in terms of Wendy's toy, it's pretty good. But it does show you that, like, the price of plastic has just gone up as time has gone on, and that the Shrek Kids Meals have slowly started to degrade. I mean, I can't even imagine what the new ones are going to look like. If we do get them, they're going to be really tiny. But even still, it's an impressive figure. I like it essentially as a better version of the Forever After figure I just looked at. This guy here that can't stand. This one can at least stand and do the war, you know. It's a scene-specific figure, so I like it for that. And he has these little holes, and the idea is that you scream into the figure, and it essentially works as a big microphone. It amplifies your scream. Don't worry, I won't ogre scream right now. But maybe that's one of the reasons this figure has such odd construction, was that gimmick. Again, it's tough to be hard on fast food figures, and you know, Shrek has had a pretty good legacy with fast food. These are some really nice figures from 3 very different companies. So many fast food toys today are just paper or little plush things that the fact we got 3 different fast food companies making 3 different figures of Shrek is commendable. There's a lot to say on fast food Shrek. I'll probably talk about it another time, but the fact that I even included these guys, that they got to compete with the regular Shrek action figures, is impressive. It is very impressive. Okay, we have one more Shrek action figure. Our most recent Shrek figure released in the early 2020s and came out around the time Puss in Boots 2 did in different territories around the world. This figure's kind of had a weird availability. Where I live in the United States, he was a Hot Topic exclusive that sold out very quickly. But from what I could find, this figure is a lot more common in the United Kingdom. Either way, this is Shrek from the Noble Collection, and he is intended to be a bendable figure. Because he's made out of rubber, you have a totally different texture on this guy, and he doesn't really look movie accurate at all. Comparing him to the existing Shrek action figures, yeah, it's totally different. But when you have a bendable rubber figure, you don't have room for texture, so he's very flat and plasticky looking. That's not to say this is a bad Shrek figure at all. I love how fully dimensional he is. A lot of these bendy figures are kind of flat like Gumby, but this guy's really like just there. I also really like the head sculpt on this Shrek. It's very clean and very modern, and looks similar to what a lot of Shrek products have looked like in the past year or two. They've simplified Shrek. They've made his skin a lot brighter, and they've made him much friendlier. And now we know, after seeing the Shrek 5 teaser, that many of these design changes were intentional. It's almost like they were trying to ease audiences into accepting the new design of Shrek by slowly altering merchandise to give Shrek a much more friendly and more toony look. And it actually works. I also really like the ogre ears on this version of Shrek. Shrek's ogre ears are very fragile, and even at the slightest bit of play will fall right off. But this is an adult collector figure. And this is actually the first Shrek figure released in the modern age, where Shrek merchandise really has been more so tailored for adults. There hasn't been a Playline Shrek figure since the original movies. It's kind of interesting that our only modern Shrek figure is something that was sold at Hot Topic of all stores. Really tells you where the license has been. As for the bendableness of the figure, this is where it fails. If you remove him off of his base here, the figure just doesn't bend. Like, I don't know if mine is missing the armature, but there's nothing here. I was really looking forward to playing around with this figure, maybe even like making some stop-motion Gumby-like stuff with him. But he doesn't move. He's essentially a big rubber guy, like those Elgian wrestler figures back from the 80s. He doesn't do anything but stand there. But he does look good while standing there. He also comes on a cool base that is able to fully support this rather top-heavy figure. So I do really like that. And if you compare him to the original McFarlane figure, you can really see how far toy design has come. The original Shrek figure is very dank looking, very detailed with all the weathering, while the new one is bright, corporate, and clean. Love it or hate it, this is our new age of Shrek. It's a lot brighter, it's a lot cleaner, and it's a lot more toonier. If you're looking for that classic dank version of the character, then, you know, the McFarlane toy is going to be your best bet. But this new guy really does give us our first look into what modern Shrek toys are going to look like. So those were all of the major Shrek figures throughout the years, and now for the exciting part, we get to rank them all and decide which ones are the best and which ones are the worst. Let's get right to it. And now it is time for the main event, the ranking. And we're going to start with the tail end, the Hasbro Shrek cavalcade here. I'm sorry, but even my nostalgia and love for this line is not enough to beat the objective fact that this is the worst Shrek figure. Kind of a shame that it's the basic figure from the line of toys that had the best distribution. Like, these are some of the easiest Shrek figures to find, but they're definitely what I would say is the worst. Okay, then I'm going to rank the Forever After McDonald's figure. This one, it has a good sculpt and it's unique, but the fact that it cannot stand on its own with his hands up in the air is ridiculous, because the whole point of this character is to have him do the war. Otherwise, he just looks like he's like pushing something behind him. It's just a little weird. So that one goes at the bottom solely for the fact that it fails as a toy. So I would say this is the bottom of the bottom. Now, moving on up into better territory, I would say the MGA Night Shrek figure. And it doesn't have anything to do with my crazy theory that this sculpt was plagiarized. We don't know that for sure. I have no issue with that. No, my main issue is that he's just too big. Like, why is he so friggin' fat? I know Shrek is chunky, and in the past, I have complained when some of the collector Shrek figures, the non-posable ones like the Funkos, make him too skinny. So it seems kind of weird now to complain that a Shrek figure is too fat. But look at this guy. He's like massive, man. It's crazy. Also, this figure has the illusion of articulation, and that drives me crazy. There's so many different points that don't move all the way around. Like, why doesn't his hands bend more? Why aren't these shoulder pads removable to at least give us something to play with, something to work with? As it is, it's just a very limiting figure. Okay, next I'm going to go with the Wendy's Shrek. This one I actually like, and now we're moving into the territory of Shrek figures I enjoy. For something that came free with your delicious Wendy's spicy nuggets and chili, you know, I don't have any real complaints other than the head sculpt's a little weird, and something about the paint. Like, he just looks so shiny. It's just a little off, but he can be posed doing the war and stand on his own. Also, this figure was a tie-in for Scared Shrekless, the Halloween special, and I like that they modeled Shrek in a scary and intimidating pose. It fits the holiday special quite well. Okay, moving on up, let's see here. I'm gonna go with Father Shrek from Forever After, the other Forever After toy line that you got in Mexico, the UK, New Zealand, and basically anywhere that wasn't the United States. I don't know why, for whatever reason, we had this inferior toy line, but I'll call this International Shrek, at least for those of us that live in the US, but he's pretty good. Like, if it was just this, yeah, I'd be pretty harsh on this figure, but the baby really makes all the difference. I mean, it's just such a great, like, dad Shrek figure. Like, I don't know, something about this figure just is so wholesome, I can't not love it. So Father Shrek goes right there. Okay, next I'm gonna go with, let's say, McFarlane Wrestling Shrek. The one that's a little weirder than the other McFarlane figures. He's a little small, a little undersized, but it's a very unique sculpt, and I like a unique Shrek. It's not bad in any way. Nothing about this figure is objectively bad. Yeah, he looks freaky, but, like, that's the figure. That's what the Shrek looks like. That's when he's happy. That's the Shrek they went with. So Then we have Wrestling Shrek. Okay, next up, I am going to go with another exclusive that we did not get in the United States, the Burger King Shrek from the UK Burger King Shrek, just because that armor design is so nice. And this figure, flying off his base there. He has this nice base. He's got nice detail on the outfit. For a Happy Meal, a kid's meal, it's good. It's really good. Okay. Next, I am going to go with Night Shrek from Shrek 1, or Dragon Battling Shrek. This is an incredible figure. Not very posable, but the sculpt is an A+, and I already talked about why I love this guy so much. Okay, now we're getting down to the last batch here. I'm going to go with New Shrek for our next slot, the bendable Shrek figure from a company called the Noble Collection, our most recent Shrek release. This was available at Hot Topic in the United States. Not very posable, but he's a nice, hefty rubber guy. I don't think I mentioned how heavy this figure is. And yes, Shrek is fat here, but look at the difference. Like, this is how fat your Shrek should be. They did not go light on the details. They spared no expense. Okay, now we're at my top 3. Okay, in number 3, I am going to go with the McFarlane Toys original Shrek. I bet you're surprised this isn't number 1. It's the most iconic Shrek toy line and the most popular, and it is an amazing figure that perfectly captures Shrek. That said, the articulation just doesn't give you a lot to work with. It's unfortunate, but I'm willing to live with it. It's a good figure. It's really good. This figure has actually become a bit more desirable in recent years. I've seen this guy go for quite a bit loose, especially if he's in good condition. A lot of people break the ears off because they're very fragile. So, McFarlane Shrek. And finally, my top 2. Number 2 is McDonald's Shrek from Shrek the Third. Now, this is an iconic figure. And the reason I decided to place him so high up is not because of how iconic it is, and it isn't even because of nostalgia. I know a lot of people have fond memories of playing with this guy, and I did own him as a kid. He was my second go-to Shrek, but Hasbro was still my main Shrek. So I'm going to pick this guy solely on objectivity, and that's that the sculpt is top-notch. No other figure got Shrek's head sculpt that good, and got his green pigmentation so correct. It is such a perfect shade of green. I cannot express how much you can just look at this and instantly know that it's Shrek. It just got everything right. The vest, the head, the green, everything. He doesn't move. He doesn't have much articulation. Just his arms go up and down. And it's kind of crazy to think that a kid's meal is the Shrek. But if you just want one Shrek figure to display with your toys, if you're not a Shrek diehard and just want one, this is the one to get. He can be found super cheap on the secondhand market. Just go to your local flea markets and thrift stores. You will likely still find him. He is unmatched, and I would love for a modern rendition of Shrek to look like this. Just take this sculpt and give it proper articulation. I would be a very, very happy man. The base is here for an amazing Shrek figure. And number 1, the best Shrek figure in my eyes, was it any surprise that it was the MGA Toys Shrek? It doesn't look perfect, and the sculpting is a little off, and I mentioned those eyebrows being weird, but you can't beat the articulation. It's so good. The hands being able to hold accessories, and photographed, this figure looks amazing. It is a great Shrek, and it's become very desirable on the secondhand market. I didn't have it for a long time, as I talk and ramble about Shrek toys, and I finally made a point to get this guy and hunt him down, and it was all worth it. It is such a nice figure of Shrek, and until we have a definitive 6-inch figure of Shrek, I think this is the best one for your money. Now, having said that, I like all of these Shreks, and many of them are good in their own ways. There is no real definitive one. Even the ones I picked at the top are lacking. Look, this one's got the good sculpt, but no articulation. This one's got the articulation, but the sculpt's a little off. So the answer to today's video is you have to buy them all. You have to have all the Shreks, people, because each Shrek is beautiful in his own Shreking way.
Wow, that was anticlimactic. I was really hoping one Shrek would emerge victorious and proceed to murder the others, or at least give me, a collector, an excuse to throw them all away. But the truth is, that's the fun of collecting Shrek, is having all these different versions of the same character. It's really interesting to see how each toy company, sculpted by different people, had different approaches to the same character. It's absolutely fascinating. And maybe someday we will have a definitive Shrek. We'll get a fancy 6-inch figure with alternate heads and hands. And I can't wait for that day, because I would love to see what that would look like. But as of now, no Shrek is really better than the others. They're all strong in their own ways. And it's super fun to collect all of the different variants of, again, the same character, and to compare them and contrast them and see what separates them and makes them different. So let me know in the comments which of the Shrek figures were your favorite, which ones were your least favorite. That's all I got for today. This has been me, Austin, rambling about Shrek toys again and again. So keep collecting Shrek, and as always, have a happily ever after.